guys, welcome again for another Magic the Gathering Dominaria United card previous video. So we are now in batch 2. This means that we're going to go another round of new card previews from several websites, and of course what our take on those card abilities and their potential for standard, modern, pioneer, but that is by my disclosure as based on my experience of the formats and of course knowledge on how the metagame has been evolving on each of these formats currently. So we begin with the first card, Defiler of Faith. I'm known this as to be a cycle of defilers in the set. So this one is for white. It is a 5 to cast 5/5 Correction Human with Vigilance, and its ability that whenever you cast a white permanent spell, you may pay 2 life. Then those spells cost 1 white mana less if you paid your life this way. So this effect reduces only the amount of white mana of the casting cost of that spell, or of that permanent that you're casting. So whenever you cast a white permanent spell, you create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. So this is one way of board generation, in the fact that it is only still cheap for a 5 mana. But the problem is, basically if you're going to tap out with this, it can become open to spot removals, which is basically can be easily killed with the setup, as there are no ways that can protect it, except that it can also just block off several creatures that are lower in toughness than its side. So in the setup, if you pay 2 life for this, you get benefit of having 1 mana less. But if you have ways to gain life, for example, you have the deck for example, the black white angels, for example, wherein you have several ways to gain life. So paying extra life to just lessen your cost of your spells or your permanents is just a little drawback for this one. So basically, I can think this will have for standard, maybe for white mid-range decks. I'm not sure if it will benefit the 3 colors kind of control deck, since it will only benefit the white permanent spells, so it's quite restricting for the setup. But I'm not sure if how the deck evolved, for example, in standard, as what new decks may have that will get to benefit on this one. So the Defiler of Fate for this setup, and our next card is the similar cycle, that is for black, Defiler of Flash. So it is a 4 to cast 4/4 Correction Horror with Menace. So with the same impact for your additional cost to cast your black permanent spells by paying 2 life and making the 2 life equivalent to a 1 black mana less cost if you're paying this life. And whenever you cast a black permanent spell, target creature you control gets +1/+1 against Menace until end of turn. What it looks to be is that you can basically go with the mono black aggro in the setup in both standard and pioneer, since there are several ways that creature based setup makes sure that you can get this trigger of your black permanent spell that you're casted, and having a creature you control it's +1/+1, a good pump in the attacks, and also having them difficult to block with the Menace ability. So I think this one is much better than that of the previous one, the white Defiler, and it fits well because of its 4 mana cost in a 4/4 power and toughness in a basic aggro deck build in both of these formats. So next up, we also have Lagamos, Hand of Hatred. It's a 3 mana cost, 1 black and red for 1/3, a legendary creature, Human Shaman. So at the beginning of combat your turn, you can create a 2/1 red elemental creature token with trouble and haste, and then sacrifice it at the beginning of next end step. And then it has an interesting ability wherein you can search the library for a card by just tapping it. Search through the library for a card, put it in your hand, and then shuffle. You can only have this online or activated if you have 5 or more creatures that have died this turn. So meaning to say, 5 more creatures, not only creatures you control, but basically creatures your opponents control. For example, you can basically sweep out a good follow up on this. After you untap with Lagomos, you can, for example, might talk Massacre for 2, but still it gets to be alive. It becomes 0/1, and then If there are several creatures from the opponents, including your own, you can get to satisfy its condition of having 5 or more creatures that have died on this turn, and at the same time get an deal card that is needed for that certain matchup. So this can be an interesting creature choice. You can have sacrifice effects on this, for example, with the Witch's Oven set up. I think this Rakdos Oven deck in Pioneer can be a good. This can be an inclusion of that. Also, I'm not sure with the Rakdos standard in aggro and the Rakdos midrange. This can be a good potential maybe board or main deck. But since having free 2/1 elemental is just very good free creature, and at the same time you have a 1/3 blocker that can basically have an option to search your library for a card. So depending on what setup of the deck, I might have a deck for this soon, as soon as the full spoiler is up. Maybe for Pioneer, as we can get more cards to go with the Rakdos Sacrifice version with the Lagamos Hand of Hatred. So next up, we have another card for white, which reminds me of the ECQ days during the pandemic, the quarantine setup, where we control our movements, and the term is temporary lockdown. So it is a 3/2 mana cost enchantment. It's like the ability of that of Portable Hole, except that you can basically exile each non-land permanent with those mana value 2 or less until temporary lockdown is the battlefield. So this is a good 3 mana sweep for against aggro, or maybe for tokens and setup. But the benefit is that having to temporarily exile them can be bad setup if your opponent has ways to deal with this enchantment. But at the same time, it's still a good way to wipe out the board as you develop your turns, since it's only 3 mana cost, and that expected for matchup for aggro decks. You can basically curve out for the first and second up to your third turn, and most of their mana values are having to be satisfied with this, with mana value 2 or less, which temporary lockdown can basically exile. So for Blood Control, it's a good addition. Also for Esper, I think the new Zur can also have this as one of your gears. For the same of the 3 formats, you can basically include this in white-based control decks, as most metagame, because this can be a generic removal. So not to mention that it can also deal not only with creatures but non-permanent, which means cheap artifacts such as engines, like the anvils, for example, can also be exiled with this card. So basically a good overall card to deal with the random shenanigans of your opponents with mana value 2 or less, which can temporarily have them locked down in the setup. So up to next card, we have Serra Paragon. This also a good mythic for the set, with niche of 4 mana cost, 3 for flying. Each of your turns, you may play a land from your graveyard or cast a permanent spell with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard. So basically, this is a good follow-up on the setup. For example, you have this lockdown has been dealt with early on. You can just have Serra Paragon have this trigger, in which you can just play that card again, since its mana value is 3, from your graveyard, and put it back into play, basically wiping out again their board with this temporary lockdown. If this one-time effect though is that if that permanent is put in the graveyard again, they will be exiled and you will gain life in the process. So still a good setup with lots of uses. For example, in which having fetch lands, for example, you can just play them again for the turn and then sacrifice it. Put it in the graveyard from the battlefield to search the library for another card. So just the option of exiling again, but you still get again 2 life and still getting a fix of your mana base if needed for the setup. So at the least value of this one, you get to only use this to basically play back your fetch lands in the modern, for example. So at the most, there are several ways that you can set up. You can cast another creature, you can cast your early aggro that may have been dealt early on, you can play again another exile effect removal such as Banishing Light from your graveyard and put it back into play. But the sad news is that you can only just trigger it once during each of your turn, and having her to tap out on your fourth turn may be open for several spot removals that can deal with her easily, since she has basically no way to protect itself but only having 3 and 4 toughness to have as to leave for that turn. But overall, Sarah Paragon can be a good inclusion if you have some graveyard shenanigans that you can partner her with, and to be able to recast them again from your graveyard. The next card we have Roadbelt Horde Masters. This is, I think this is from Maro's hints of list, wherein he mentioned the lords, the lords for each color. So this one is for the goblins for red. It's basically 2 to cast 1/1, but you can basically pump up your other goblins. So whenever Roadbelt Horde Master or another goblin you control dies, you get the exile top card library, and if that is a goblin card, you may cast it that card until the end of your next turn. So basically a good card draw, but sort of a delayed card draw, but only for a goblin creature card. So making sure that its trigger is satisfied well for each turn, or whenever goblin you control dies, make sure that you can build tribal goblins with a setup of having most of them under the creature type or the creature card of goblins in a set. But I think with this hint in which we have a good goblins, there's still a possibility that a good goblin deck can come out on this setup with Dominaria United. But given that we would also go with a goblin tribal aggro in modern and pioneer, you can this is, I think, is an auto inclusion because of its ability of pumping and having a 2-drop for 2, and you can just basically curve it with another lord on third 3, like a war chief for example, to make it sure that it gets bigger and not too really prone to cheap spot removals. So overall, it's a good deck and good card to include. But standard still pending, but I'm pretty sure it still get a gameplay in pioneer and modern. Next card we have Krata Drabik Orborg. It's an excellent, interesting name for a legendary zombie wizard. It's a 4/4 white and black, 3/3 vigilance in ward. It gets your zombies control have vigilance. It looks to be a lord when it sends, but it is not only giving them vigilance instead. So whenever another creature you control dies, you create a token that's copy of the creature, except that it's not legendary, and it's a 2/2 black zombie in addition to its colors and types. So it's benefit on legendary creatures. So for its deck build, I'm not really sure if there are enough legendary creatures that can get to benefit on this as to build around for this deck. Maybe there are a few that we can check for Dominaria and other sets in the format, but I'm not pretty sure if this is a good card. But think of this as a play around card that you should be able to identify what cards that could work well with this one. Maybe for pioneer or modern, I think there are several legendary creatures that you can get to partner with this to get this ability, but having the zombies, the other zombies you control have vigilance, I think it's not just a pseudo support for a zombie tribal deck in the setup. So next up we have Tamil Slothos. I think we're going to the last 4 cards in this batch. So this is Thunder Mythic with a return of a version of a Lotus again, which I'm not pretty sure if just going to see standard gameplay. But in this setup, just basically add to top 5 mana of all colors, and then it's just a legendary fact, but lore wise it's still a good card in the setup. But the sad just that is the comes to play tap, which I think that's the way to ramp up or the sort of the setup. Maybe for I'm not sure if the Lotus Field decks can go with this deck in Pioneer. For standard, I'm not. If we're going to a 5-color domain deck, maybe we'd partner with a spell that can cost one of each color and be impactful in the game. Then this can become a good addition to the setup. But let's say we're expecting a Kami War type of deck wherein we have a domain inspired 5-color, then this can be a good inclusion to fix up their mana and also add a sort of a ramp in this format of type of deck. But for my initial insights of this is that it can be a good addition for any commander decks that can have for the 5-color setup, in which you can have this as a sort of a mana stone in their lineup for the deck. So just about for this. Next we have Dalian Mind Singer for 3 blue mana and 2/2, but with your option of kicker, 1 in red and or 1 in green. So this is a Merfolk Wizard with an interesting way wherein you can splash red or green in the setup. So it enters the battlefield with 2% counters on it each time it was kicked. So the first time it's kicked, it becomes a 4/4. Then the second time, it becomes a 6/6. So when it enters the battlefield, gain control of target creature with power less than Dalian Mind Singer's power as long as you control Dalian Mind Singer. So it's a good inclusion. I've thought of a Mind Flayer setup from AFR. So its option here also is that the condition of having to splash colors for the kicker cost and to gain benefit for it, but in its least scenario, given that it is a wizard, you can have in a tribal Merfolk deck this one as a sideboard, in which you can also just have this as against maybe for aggro decks, or maybe just gaining control of a relevant creature from the opponent that makes sure that they have less power from that of this one. But that still would depend on what the metagame would look like, if this would be enough to convince us that Merfolks will have this in their sideboard. But for standard, I think this is a good and interesting deck to have, since we still have these colors favored, as we still have the stable colors, tri-colors scenario in the format. Then this can be a good 1 obs or 2 obs in the deck. If needed, they can just have more in the sideboard, as it can also become a good threat by itself, but also at the same time getting their best creature as long as their power is less than that of Dalian Mind Singer. So Rapik, this is Kion best twist color. This is a 2 to cast 2/2 Dread Warrior. So whenever you cast a creature spell, put up some counter on it. Then with it dice, distribute the X +1/+1 counters among any number of target creatures control, where X is the number of +1/+1 counters on Beast Color. So reminds me of the previous deck build that I made for Gruul Modified. So it has a similar ability to that of Gala Glitters, except that the condition is that whenever you cast a creature spell, so it becomes big at the same time as you untap on the third mana cost. For example, you can tap for your third turn, as long as you play this on your second turn. Then the least that you can get is a 1% counter as you cast your third 3 mana cost creature to do this as a follow-up. So the interesting on this, that whenever it dies, that you can just basically affinity these counters on any number of targets you control if needed, to just distribute them, and at the same time have the less threat creature in your lineup becomes bigger with these counters. So for standard deck, I think this can be a good addition for a modified creature aggro deck. Since this is also a 2-drop in a sense, you can partner with the Gala Glitters, and also the other 2-drop I made mention of the mana dude, the 1/3 mana dude, and also add in this lineup. I think 2 or 4 copies is very much a ideal for this setup. So last card on the setup, we have Haunted Gene for this batch. From translation, it is a 3 mana cost blue Gene with star and 4, in which the power is equal to the number of sorcery instant cards in your graveyard. It has flying, and it makes sure that your instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So as that initial look, it is a good Phoenix deck inclusion, since it is a good 4 mana 4 toughness that you can bypass most spot removals pre-sideboard, and at the same time, since we have a lot of cantrip spells, some 2 mana cost that the Gene can make 1 colorless mana less, and at the same time, as long as you fill up your graveyard with a certain number of instant sorcery cards, you can make its power bigger, and can be a good attacker with its evading flying ability. Now for standard, well, if the Delver decks would still be a good deck to set up on this, maybe still going with the EZ plan, or maybe going with some Esper or 3 mana 3 color setup, then this will be a good addition to their build, as long as you make sure that you still have enough variants in their components of instant and sorcery and creatures, so be able to get its benefit of having 1 less to cast, and at the same time filling up your graveyard with your instant and sorcery spells that you've casted for less, to make sure that it can be a good attacker. And I think this is also a good partner with that of Ledger Shredder, since it can curve pretty well. The Shredder can connives for the second card draw, and at the same time fill up some extra instant and sorcery cards in graveyard, to make sure that the power can be a good in not in the average setup of this deck. So overall, this is also another, can I just say, 8 out of 10 card for me, but if added to a right deck build, can be still become a good and efficient card, if given that you know what archetype to include for this build and this setup. So overall, that's a wrap for this end of batch 2 for this slide of Dominaria United card spoilers. So if you're already checking on a few of these new cards from Twitter, maybe from other websites such as MTG Goldfish, or from Magic Spoilers, or also from the official site, you've already seen also what's coming for the next of the new cards. And I think as of this posting, I'm not pretty sure if we have already passed the 60 or 70% of the cards spoiled already for the official spoiling of the Dominaria United set. So that's a wrap for this video. Thank you for checking on this. Don't forget to like and subscribe on my channel, youtube.com/TV, for more Magic the Gathering Dominaria United content. And until the next post of this stuff, and also other tournament local use and setup for this. Thank you for watching, and until the next time.